Did you know the most famous story about George Washington is completely fake? He didn't chop down a cherry tree, he didn't have wooden teeth, and he wasn't even the first president. But the biggest myth about Washington isn't about a tree. It's that people today remember the strategy that actually won the revolution. Because if we had remembered it, we might have avoided a few trillion-dollar mistakes. Let's talk about what George Washington really understood about war and why modern America keeps forgetting it. There are a lot of myths about George Washington. The famous "I cannot tell a lie" cherry tree story is complete fiction. It comes from a biography published shortly after he died. He didn't have wooden teeth. His dentures were made of ivory, human and animal teeth, and metal springs. They stained easily, which helped the myth. He was not America's first president. That title belongs to John Hanson, who served under the Articles of Confederation. Washington was first under our Constitution. Another myth is that Washington was a perfect military leader. He was not. During the Battle of Long Island, he was outflanked by the British. He allowed the British General William Howe to outflank him, which could have ended the War of Independence before it had truly begun. None of this is to say that George Washington was not an honorable man. He was the only slave-holding founder to free his slaves upon his death. His strategy during the Revolutionary War, one he likely absorbed from Native American warfare, was brilliant. He knew head-to-head was a fool's game. They were better equipped and better trained than the ragtag army the Continental Congress had assembled. Washington realized the best way to win was not to lose. He understood that keeping British troops on American soil was expensive and that the king and parliament would not tolerate the outlay forever. He also knew British soldiers were not made of stone. They had families and homes they missed. Extend the war long enough and their desire would fade, which it did at the Siege of Yorktown. This became one of the founding strategic doctrines of the Republic. Yet we forget it from time to time. What is it they say? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We should have relearned that lesson in the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese fought the same type of war George Washington did against the British. And it cost the United States nearly 60,000 American lives, over 300,000 wounded, and roughly $1.2 trillion in today's money. We forgot that lesson again in the war in Afghanistan. Even after Vizzini warned us in The Princess Bride, never get involved in a land war in Asia. That was a $2.6 trillion, under to 75,000 lives error, born of historical amnesia. Which brings us to our current journey of historical dementia. Perpetrated by a president, a secretary of defense, and a Congress that is vertebracally challenged. These are the men who not only forgot history, but are now rediscovering it at a cost to the American taxpayer of roughly $1 billion a day. The Iranians understand history better than these men. They understand what George Washington understood, that to defeat us, all they need to do is not lose. They can be pounded by every weapon in the US and Israeli arsenals, and as long as the regime is still intact, when the smoke clears, they win. Before going further, let me be clear. The Iranian government was and is a bad actor. It has sponsored terrorism. It cannot be allowed to possess nuclear weapons. That said, we had an agreement to halt their development of nuclear weapons, and Donald Trump ripped it up. The current mess we are in is in large part due to his recklessness in moving away from that treaty. Was it perfect? No. Should it have been renegotiated? Maybe. But tearing up an agreement may work in real estate, not with nuclear weapons. So this mess, largely on Trump and those who wear his Florsheim shoes. And what has forgetting George Washington's strategy gotten us? Oil at record levels, inflation driven by that spike, the loss of respect from many of our allies, and of course, aid and comfort to our enemies. When you take restrictions off Russia, selling its oil worldwide, you are giving them more money to pound Ukraine with Iranian-made drones. all because Donald Trump trusts his gut more than he trusts George Washington's lesson in history. And folks, we are not done with the fallout. Our allies no longer trust us. The president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, said, "My message to the United States, Israel, and Iran is simple. The world is tired of your conflicts. Diplomacy is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. The path of war only produces destruction, hunger, refugees, and instability that affects all nations. The world needs dialogue, negotiation, and respect for international law. If there is any bit of good news, it is that Trump has really stepped on his own dick with this war. Metaphorically, of course. He has famously small hands. Nearly 60% of U.S. voters think this war is a bad idea. And with every day we spend $1 billion, lose more American lives, and watch inflation tick upward, his support wanes, which should translate, with any luck at all, into a blue November and an impeachment January. Which brings me back to George Washington's strategic brilliance. All we need to do is not lose. Washington beat the British Empire by outlasting it. Surely the American Republic can outlast one loud man who thinks history began the day he walked into a room.